What if the very thoughts that make you unique are the same ones that push you away from the crowd? Why is it that society celebrates comfort, yet quietly rejects those who dare to question its foundations? And most importantly, what hidden fear drives people to turn their backs on the deepest thinkers of our time? Have you ever noticed that the deeper your thoughts go, the further you drift from those around you? That the more you perceive, the less people seem to care? You're not imagining it. Deep thinking has always been a quiet rebellion, one that unsettles the world. It doesn't simply challenge the status quo, it questions the very foundations of how we live, what we believe, and why we act the way we do. In doing so, it shakes the comfort zones people desperately cling to. Not because it's false, but because it shines a light where others prefer darkness. History doesn't lie. From Socrates to Nietzsche, Galileo to Tesla, those who saw beyond the surface were often mocked, silenced, or dismissed. Not for lack of brilliance, but because their truth made others uneasy. Schopenhauer, brutally honest and unapologetically clear, believed that intelligence was not a gift, but a curse. A curse that isolates those who see the world with too much clarity. But why is that? Why does society turn its back on those who dare to think differently? The answer is not simple, it is layered, built upon human psychology, social instincts, and the invisible forces of culture that value harmony over truth. The truth lies deep within human psychology. Consider this. When you stand beside someone physically strong, you don't automatically feel weak. You admire their strength. When you see someone with wealth, you might feel envy, but rarely offense. Yet, when you're faced with someone intellectually superior, something different happens, something deeper. Psychologists call it the mirror effect. A true thinker doesn't just bring new ideas, they become a reflection of what others lack. And that kind of mirror people tend to shatter rather than face. Sometimes just the presence of a deep thinker is enough to make others feel small without a single word being spoken. But why is that? Why does intelligence more than strength or status unsettle people so deeply? To grasp this, we need to look at how our minds interpret different kinds of superiority. When someone's physically stronger, we often see a protector, a leader, someone to follow, not fear. When someone is wealthier, we might admire their success or even feel inspired to pursue our own strength, wealth, beauty. These are external traits. We can acknowledge them without questioning who we are. But intelligence is different. It doesn't just exist outside of us. It touches something internal. Unlike muscles or money, intellect is woven into our sense of self. It's personal. It defines how we see the world and how we see ourselves within it. We shape our identity through our thoughts, our beliefs, and our understanding of the world around us. So when we encounter someone who thinks more deeply, someone who questions what we've always accepted, it can feel like a threat, not a gift. It's not that the deep thinker is arrogant or unkind. It's that their presence alone challenges the foundation of how others see themselves. And instead of admiration, what often surfaces is quiet resistance. Because facing someone else's clarity means facing our own blind spots. This is why time and time again, history has pushed deep thinkers to the edges of society. Their ideas don't just disrupt beliefs, they unsettle egos. And if there's one thing human nature resists, it's the discomfort of a wounded ego. Think about your own life for a moment. Have you ever brought up a deep or complex thought in a casual setting, only to be met with blank stares, nervous laughter, or uncomfortable silence? Have you ever noticed how quickly conversations change when they start to go beyond surface level talk? That's not just coincidence. It's a psychological defense. When someone is faced with a deep thinker, the mind instinctively shields itself. Curiosity gives way to resistance. Engagement turns into dismissal. And this is why so many intellectuals, philosophers, and visionaries walk a lonely path, understood by few, misunderstood by many. Not because they choose solitude, but because society quietly exiles them. What's even more revealing is this. Studies show that in most social settings, confidence is often valued more than intelligence. People gravitate toward those who speak with certainty, even when the substance is lacking. Charisma can outshine complexity. This is why the loudest voices, even when simplistic, often gain more influence than the quiet minds who speak with nuance. History offers no shortage of proof. Populist leaders, motivational speakers, viral influencers, they rise by feeding people what they want to hear, not what they need to question. They offer comfort, not challenge. Meanwhile, those who dare to question the status quo, who push others to think deeper, often find themselves speaking to empty rooms. This is the paradox of intelligence. The closer one gets to truth, the further they drift from the crowd. The mirror effect doesn't just expose society's limitations. It reveals why true change is so often resisted. But it raises a deeper question. If intelligence is so threatening, can science prove that people actually fear it? Modern neuroscience says yes. Research shows that when someone feels intellectually outmatched, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, lights up just as it would in the face of danger. In other words, deep thinking isn't just unsettling. It's perceived as a threat. It triggers a primal survival response similar to the one we feel when we're in real danger. But why does intelligence activate the same neural pathways as a physical threat? The answer lies in our evolutionary roots. For most of human history, survival wasn't about being the smartest person in the room. It was about being part of the group. Our ancestors lived in tribes where acceptance meant protection, and standing out too much could mean exile. Social harmony wasn't just preferred, it was survival. Rejection from the group wasn't just uncomfortable, it was life-threatening. Isolation made one vulnerable, and vulnerability meant death. This is why our brains evolved to prioritize social acceptance over intellectual exploration. So when a highly intelligent person enters a social space, they unknowingly disturb the tribal equilibrium. Their presence alone can challenge beliefs, unsettle norms, and disrupt the unspoken rules that keep the group feeling safe. This disruption activates the brain's defense systems, not in response to danger, but to difference. The deep thinker is perceived not as a contributor, but as a threat. This is why so many intellectuals feel alone, not due to poor social skills, but because their very nature sets them apart in a world that prizes conformity over insight. And in 2021, a study from Stanford University revealed something even more unsettling. The way people respond to deep thinkers depends heavily on context. One-on-one, the threat is minimal. Curiosity can even flourish. But in group settings, everything changes. The fear response intensifies. Why? Because in groups, social status takes center stage. It's no longer just about the thinker's intelligence. It's about how everyone else feels seen in comparison. People aren't just reacting to ideas, they're reacting to what those ideas might reveal about themselves in front of others. When someone feels overshadowed by a deep thinker, the instinct isn't always to listen. It's often to push back. To protect their social standing, they may subtly undermine, dismiss, or exclude the thinker altogether. This is why deep, authentic conversations are more likely to happen in private. While larger social settings feel shallow or strained, psychology offers more insight into this resistance. Several cognitive biases come into play, none more telling than the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect reveals a crucial truth. Those with limited understanding often overestimate their knowledge, while truly intelligent individuals are more likely to question their own. This imbalance creates tension. Those who know little may feel falsely confident, and that confidence leads them to reject deeper thinkers without hesitation. Add to that the status quo bias, the brain's preference for the familiar, and it becomes clear why new complex ideas are so often ignored. Intelligence disrupts, it unsettles. And that discomfort is something most minds instinctively avoid. Then there's the backfire effect, a cognitive bias that makes truth even harder to share. When people are confronted with facts that challenge their beliefs, they rarely reconsider. Instead, they dig in deeper, cling tighter to what they already believe. Deep thinkers run into this wall constantly, especially when their ideas threaten comfortable narratives. And in today's digital world, that resistance is louder than ever. Social media has turned thoughtful discourse into a popularity contest. Algorithms reward outrage, not insight. Emotion spreads. Simplicity sells. Depth gets buried. Look at the most viral content online. Quick, catchy, and often misleading. Sound bites win over substance. The deeper the thinker, the harder it becomes to distill complex truths into bite-sized, shareable pieces. And in a world driven by speed and spectacle, this creates a harsh reality. Entertainment eclipses enlightenment. Nuance gets lost in the noise. And for those who seek truth, acceptance grows increasingly out of reach. So, what does all this mean for deep thinkers? The resistance they face isn't just social. It's biological, psychological, and cultural. It's wired into human nature, shaped by tribal instincts, and amplified by the digital age. But that doesn't mean they should stay silent. It simply means they must recognize the powerful forces pushing back against them. Because if society resists intelligence so fiercely, then what exactly does it embrace? The answer lies in comfort. In a world where predictability is valued more than truth, intelligence becomes an unwelcome disruption. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest minds in philosophy, didn't see intelligence as a blessing, but a burden. While others linked intellect to success, Schopenhauer believed that the more a person understands, the harder it becomes to feel connected to the world around them. But why is that? What makes intelligence feel so heavy? At the heart of his philosophy was a concept he called the will, a blind, irrational force that fuels all human behavior, a force that doesn't care for truth, only survival. And in a world ruled by this will, the deep thinker becomes an outsider because clarity has no place where comfort reigns. According to Schopenhauer, most people are driven by the will to live, a force that prioritizes pleasure, comfort, and survival above all else. Life for them is about ease and avoidance of pain. But highly intelligent individuals are wired differently. Rather than blindly following instinct, they cultivate what he called the will to truth, a relentless drive to uncover reality, no matter how unsettling it may be. While the majority seek comfort, the deep thinker seeks clarity, and clarity often comes at the cost of peace. Deep thinkers pursue truth even when it leads to discomfort, pain, and isolation. And in that pursuit, they often drift further from the world around them. While most find meaning in relationships, entertainment, and the comforts of routine, the deep thinker sees through them, recognizing these as fleeting distractions from life's deeper, more unsettling questions. Schopenhauer believed that the more a person understands human nature, the more difficult it becomes to connect with others. Because once you see beneath the surface, it's hard to pretend the surface is enough. They see through the lies, the games, the subtle deceptions that underpin most social interactions. Small talk, status games, polite dishonesty, it all feels hollow to someone who values truth over appearance. Deep thinkers crave substance while society rewards simplicity. Where others are content with surface-level conversation, they long for something real, something meaningful, and in the absence of that, boredom and disconnection set in. They see the endless cycle of human desire for what it is, fleeting, repetitive, and ultimately futile. Schopenhauer viewed desire and ambition as illusions, empty pursuits that keep people trapped in a cycle of longing and dissatisfaction. Most chase money, power, relationships, believing these will bring fulfillment. But deep thinkers often pause to ask why. They question the purpose behind the chase, the meaning behind the milestones, and in doing so, they can appear distant, detached, even indifferent to what excites the majority. This is why highly intelligent people so often feel misunderstood, alienated, or quietly resented. Their presence becomes a mirror, one that reflects truths others would rather not see. Schopenhauer likened intelligence to a heightened form of awareness, a gift that feels more like a burden. A high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial, he wrote. And his reasoning was clear. The more you understand, the harder it becomes to look away. The more clearly you see the flaws, the suffering, the contradictions of the world, the more difficult it is to find joy within it. Depth brings clarity, but also solitude. For Schopenhauer, happiness and intelligence weren't companions. They were opposites. The deeper you think, the lonelier the road becomes. Schopenhauer believed that happiness belonged not to the wise, but to the unaware. In his view, ignorance, not wisdom, was a true key to contentment, and history echoes this truth. Thinkers like Enzi, Pascal, and Kafka all wrestled with depression, existential dread, and the heavy cost of seeing the world too clearly. But Schopenhauer didn't stop at diagnosis. He offered a path forward. He understood that while intelligence often leads to isolation, there are ways to live with it. His first piece of advice embraced solitude. To Schopenhauer, solitude wasn't a punishment. It was a privilege, a sacred space where deep thinkers could retreat from the noise and turn inward. He urged the intellectually gifted not to waste their energy chasing social approval, but to use their alone time for reflection, creation, and learning. Instead of molding themselves to fit into a society that misunderstands them, he encouraged them to seek out like minds through books, philosophy, or rare circles of intellectual companionship. And most importantly, he advised, engage with the world, but do so wisely. Know when to speak, when to listen, and when to walk away. Schopenhauer warned against casting pearls before swine, sharing profound insights with those unprepared to receive them. Instead, he urged thinkers to observe quietly, learn society's rhythms, and speak with intention. His philosophy stands as a guide for the modern deep thinker, navigating a world that often misunderstands them. Yes, intelligence may bring loneliness, but it also brings clarity, freedom, and a deeper connection to the truth of existence. In that quiet space between rejection and reflection, deep thinkers find not just isolation, but meaning. To Schopenhauer, intelligence was a double-edged sword, a gift that illuminates truth but also cuts through comfort. It allows one to see reality with piercing clarity, yet in doing so creates distance from those who would rather live in illusion. In the end, his philosophy affirms what many deep thinkers have always felt. Society doesn't fear intelligence. It fears what intelligence uncovers. Deep thinkers aren't dismissed because they're wrong. They're dismissed because they're right too early. So, if you've ever felt alone in your thoughts, misunderstood, or out of place, remember this. You are not broken. You are just ahead. You are simply seeing the world as it truly is. But does that mean deep thinkers are destined for a life of isolation? Or is there a way to move through society without dimming one's depth? The truth is, society isn't designed to nurture deep thought. It's designed to preserve order, stability, familiarity. Most people choose comfort over truth, not because they're incapable of depth, but because they fear what lies beneath the surface. That's why shallow conversations, simplistic ideas, and recycled content thrive in public spaces. But the question remains, why is comfort valued more than understanding? Why does society resist change even when that change promises progress? The answer lies in the architecture of the human mind and the systems that mold it from childhood. At its core, the brain craves certainty and predictability. It's a survival instinct. Evolution has wired us to avoid what feels unfamiliar or mentally taxing. Psychologists call this phenomenon cognitive ease, the preference for ideas that are simple, familiar, and effortless to process. And anything that challenges that ease is often met with resistance, not because it's wrong, but because it feels hard. The brain favors simplicity and familiarity because they require less cognitive effort. When an idea is complex, nuanced, or unfamiliar, the brain registers it as mentally expensive and potentially threatening. This is where system justification theory comes into play. It explains why people often defend the status quo even when it clearly works against their best interests. Instead of challenging authority or outdated norms, most choose to rationalize them, not out of ignorance, but out of a deep-rooted desire for certainty. Groupthink then reinforces this, where collective comfort is prioritized over individual insight and questioning the narrative becomes a silent taboo. Most people would rather conform to accepted beliefs than risk the discomfort of standing alone. The fear of social rejection runs deep, so deep that even truth becomes secondary to belonging. This is why intellectual dissent, no matter how valid, is often dismissed or attacked. The mind seeks ease, and ease is found in agreement, not contradiction. This preference for comfort over complexity explains why so many intellectuals, philosophers, and scientists are only truly appreciated long after their time when their ideas are no longer threatening. And in today's digital world, this dynamic has only intensified. Who captures the spotlight on social media? It's rarely the thinkers, it's the entertainers. Those who can compress complex ideas into catchy, feel-good sound bites rise to the top. Thought-provoking discussions get buried because depth demands time, patience, and attention. Three things the digital world rarely offers. In contrast, viral content thrives on speed, emotion, and simplicity. And the algorithms know this. They don't reward truth. They reward engagement. And nothing engages faster than outrage, controversy, or humor. The result? Nuance is overshadowed. Rational discourse is drowned out. And the voices that challenge us are often the first to be ignored. Echo chambers form, digital spaces where people encounter only the ideas that confirm what they already believe. In these environments, new perspectives aren't welcomed. They're rejected. Deep thinkers who question the dominant narrative are often ignored, misunderstood, or even attacked. But this resistance to depth didn't start online. It began long before in the institutions designed to shape our thinking. Schools, workplaces, and the broader education system don't cultivate independent thought. They reward conformity, obedience, and repetition. Instead of encouraging students to ask why, they train them to memorize what, to follow, not to question. Schools often claim to value intelligence, but what they truly reward is obedience. Students who memorize, follow rules, and echo the approved answers are praised. Those who question, who challenge authority, or think beyond the curriculum are frequently labeled as difficult or disruptive. And the pattern doesn't stop there. In the corporate world, it's not the most intelligent or innovative minds that rise. It's those who conform, who blend into the culture, and preserve the existing hierarchy. Politics is no different. No. Leaders who speak hard truths grounded in logic and reason often lose out to those who master the art of telling people what they want to hear. This is why many of history's greatest intellectuals were dismissed, silenced, or exiled in their time. Their ideas weren't embraced, they were feared. Not because they were wrong, but because they were disruptive. Society likes to say it values intelligence, innovation, and critical thinking. But the truth is, it only celebrates these things after they've been sanitized, stripped of their edge, and accepted by the mainstream. Just look at the examples throughout history. Galileo was imprisoned for revealing truths that threatened the church, but today we honor him as a pioneer of science. Van Gogh died in obscurity and poverty. Yet his paintings now sell for millions. Nikola Tesla, whose inventions shaped the modern world, spent his final years forgotten and alone. Again and again, history shows us the pattern. Society doesn't embrace intelligence when it challenges the norm. It only celebrates it in hindsight, once it's safe and no longer a threat. So, what can deep thinkers do in a world that so often misunderstands them? If you've ever felt out of place because of how deeply you think, know this: you are not alone. You are in the company of minds that shaped history. Throughout history, many of the brightest minds weren't praised. They were punished, ridiculed, silenced, or forgotten, not because they lacked truth, but because their truth came too soon. Their ideas were labeled dangerous, disruptive, or simply too complex for their time. But they all shared one defining trait. They were ahead of the curve, and for that, they paid a price. Socrates, the father of Western philosophy, spent his life urging people to question what they thought they knew. He challenged society to think critically, to embrace reason over tradition, and to seek wisdom rather than comfort. For his efforts, he was sentenced to death. But instead of being honored for his wisdom, Socrates was put on trial, accused of corrupting the youth and dishonoring the gods. His true offense, urging people to think for themselves, to question authority, to seek truth over tradition. Even when offered a chance to escape, Socrates chose death over compromise. He drank the poison willingly, staying true to his principles. His final words still echo through time. The unexamined life is not worth living. His death sent a powerful message. Society does not fear ignorance. It fears those who challenge its deepest beliefs. Galileo's only crime, discovering the truth. When Galileo proved that the earth revolves around the sun, he didn't just make a scientific discovery. He shattered centuries of religious dogma. The church, which maintained power by controlling knowledge, labeled him a heretic. Under threat of torture, he was forced to publicly recant his own findings. Today, we hail him as one of the greatest scientific minds in history. But in his time, he was silenced. He spent his remaining years under house arrest, his work banned for nearly a century. Galileo's story is a stark reminder. Even the most undeniable truth will be rejected if they threaten those in power. Nietzsche's ideas were seen as too radical, too unsettling for his time. He challenged the very foundation of traditional morality, claiming it was built on comforting illusions rather than truth. He argued that real strength came not from conformity, but from the courage to create one's own values, to live authentically, even in a meaningless world. But society wasn't ready. His work was dismissed as madness. He was ridiculed, misunderstood, and eventually institutionalized. And yet today, nature's philosophy shapes modern thought. From psychology to literature to existentialism, what was once considered dangerous is now regarded as visionary. Nature's ideas on power, the will, and morality now lie at the heart of modern philosophy, proving a timeless truth. Society often rejects deep thinkers in the present, only to celebrate them long after. Tesla was another visionary. He imagined a world powered by free energy, wireless electricity, and groundbreaking innovations that could have redefined human progress. But his ideas were too bold, too liberating. And those in power didn't see potential. They saw a threat. His dreams were dismissed, his funding cut, and his legacy buried beneath the shadows of more marketable minds. Industrialists like Thomas Edison and J.P. Morgan had everything to lose from Tesla's vision of free energy. They profited from controlling power, literally. So when Tesla proposed a world where energy flowed without wires and without cost, they shut him down. Despite his genius, Tesla died alone in a modest hotel room, forgotten, penniless, while others grew rich off the very ideas he pioneered. His story is a harsh truth. Society often rewards businessmen and marketers over true visionaries. Alan Turing's story follows a similar pattern. His groundbreaking work in cryptography helped bring World War II to an end. His code-breaking genius saved millions of lives, and his theories in computation became the bedrock of modern artificial intelligence. Yet instead of being honored, Alan Turing was punished for who he was. In 1952, he was chemically castrated for being gay, a sentence that led to his tragic suicide at just 41. The same society he helped save turned its back on him. Today, he's remembered as a hero, a pioneer of modern computing. But during his lifetime, his brilliance was overshadowed by prejudice. And while most of history's deep thinkers were men, Hypatia of Alexandria stood as a rare and courageous exception. A philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer, she thrived in the male-dominated intellectual world of ancient Rome, fearlessly teaching, questioning, and challenging societal norms. Hypatia taught logic, mathematics, and scientific reasoning in a time when blind faith held sway. Her commitment to rational thought placed her in direct conflict with the religious authorities of her day. In 415 AD, she was brutally murdered by a mob of extremists who saw her intellect as a threat to their power. Her death wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a symbol of a deeper truth. Intellectual progress is often met with violent resistance. This pattern echoes across history. Each of these thinkers shared a common fate. They introduced ideas too advanced, too honest, too disruptive for their time. And in return, they were ridiculed, rejected, or punished, not because they were wrong, but because they dared to be right too soon. Ironically, the very ideas that were once feared, silenced, or condemned later became the foundation of human progress. Society doesn't truly fear intelligence, it fears what intelligence demands: change. And that brings us to a crucial question. If history shows us that deep thinkers are often rejected, what should you do if you are one of them? Does it mean you're destined for isolation? Not at all. It simply means you must learn to navigate the world with wisdom. Not every space is ready for depth. Not every person is open to truth, and that's okay. Save your most profound thoughts for those who truly value them. You don't need millions to understand you, just the right few. Seek out kindred minds, whether through books, quiet communities, or thoughtful conversations in the margins of society. Even the greatest thinkers knew the importance of connection. Einstein once said, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." Depth doesn't have to be overwhelming. Learn to communicate your insight with clarity and patience. Let your wisdom be a bridge, not a wall. Schopenhauer once wrote, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. Deep thinkers see what others overlook. They ask the hard questions. They challenge the comfortable lies." And yes, that will always make some people uneasy. But that discomfort is not a flaw. It's a sign of truth stirring beneath the surface. So no, you shouldn't stop thinking deeply. The world may not always welcome your mind, but it needs it. Society often fears what it doesn't understand, but it is the minds that dare to question, challenge, and dream that move humanity forward. If you ever felt like an outsider because of how you think, remember this: you are not broken. You are not alone. You are exactly what the future needs. If this video resonated with you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt misunderstood or rejected for thinking deeply? Let's start a real conversation, one that goes beyond the surface. And if you're drawn to the wisdom of history's greatest minds and want to explore more ideas that challenge, inspire, and elevate, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started.